I'm Patrick Bailey with IQlist.com. Today is February 4th, 2020, and in this video I'll be showing you how to replace your nozzle on your Prusa i3 Mark III 3D printer. Okay, before I go into this, let me show you some other resources that are out there. And one of the best ones you can probably find is How to Replace Your Extruder Nozzle by Prusa himself. So I'll put a link in the show notes here. Probably go here. It's a real simple, easy video, and I'll be doing most of what he's doing. He's got nice, crisp, clear views. So sometimes it's really nice to get a real good camera in there. They did a real good job. So you might want to go watch that video as well. Another thing I'll be doing here at some point is doing a cold pull. And I'll go over that in a minute. But the 3D printing nerd has a nice video here on cold pulls and why you need to do that. So with all that, let me kind of go over what I am going to do. So what I'm trying to do is I have my Prusa Mini over here. And I have my Prusa i3 Mark III that I just recently fixed the pulley on it because I wasn't getting quite good prints on it. But I'm still not kind of getting really good prints on the surface. And so I'm thinking there might be a problem with how the filament is coming out. And for those of you who are new to 3D printing, here I have a little sketch of, the schematics of the heater block and everything coming out of here. So just to kind of go over how everything works for those who may not be aware, is here at the top where your filament is coming in, there's this long plastic tube. In that plastic tube, we have this aluminum heater block, aluminum fins that are trying to extract extra heat out here, any heat that comes up. And then attached to them, there's this little metal piece right here that has these threads on either side. It's kind of like a little tiny thin piece. And that's what you see kind of popping out there. And that's called a heat break. And it's trying to keep the heat away from going up. It tries to keep, trying to make sure not so much heat is going up here. So what happens, and then down here, is the heater block. So here's this heater block, this, you'll see this square aluminum piece down there. And that's where it tries to put all your heat. Now in the heater block, you have the nozzle screwed in down here. And you also have the heating element over here. That's the bigger knob. And you also have, over here, you have a heat sensor, a thermistor. And so it's trying to detect the heat, and this is trying to provide the heat. Now, what can happen is, under isolated situations, your filament is flowing through here and flowing through just fine and coming out at an even rate, and everything is working just well. But what happens if a little bit of dust or some specks get in there and get stuck, especially near the nozzle? What can happen is that might build up a little bit over time, and it might not come out as well. Now, right now, I don't really need to do a cold pull. Mine's working, maybe a cold pull. Maybe I do need to do a cold pull. But I'm going to do a cold pull, and I'm going to replace the nozzle because I want to kind of get it to a really nice state so that I can start comparing the Prusa Mini to the Prusa i3 Mark III side by side and kind of see how they're doing prints compared to each other. So in a cold pull, what you would do is you would heat this thing up, and you could push the filament through, make sure it's coming out. And then at some point, and there's different methodology to this, and so I'll kind of do what I've done in the past, but I haven't done it a lot. So you might want to look up some other people's techniques. But then what you do is you let it cool down a little bit to where it's more solid, but you don't let it cool down all the way. I've heard, 100 degrees C or 60 degrees C, but you let it cool down. And then what you do is you do what's called a cold pull, or some people call it an atomic pull. So at this point, this is fairly solid all the way down, and you pull it out. And that means it'll be solid down here too, and it'll kind of hold on to any junk out there, and you'll pull it out. In fact, the end of the filament will be shaped like the end of the nozzle. And that's kind of cool. I've done it once or twice. I haven't had to do it much. And it can clean the gunk out and hopefully clear things up. So I'm going to do that just to clean things up before I replace the nozzle. So I'm going to pull all that filament out. And then what I'm going to do after that is I'm going to follow kind of what Prusa recommends, heat this thing up to 285 degrees, and then remove the nozzle. So to remove the nozzle itself, you need a 7mm socket wrench. And so I have a socket wrench here I just bought that I just used for my Prusa. And so I set it aside so I know that that's going to be right and be the correct size. And then you can use a crescent wrench, but I was a little lazy because I shouldn't say lazy. I'm paranoid because I had an issue. So I got a 23mm wrench that I just used for that to hold on to the heater block. Because what I did when I first had my Prusa, and I have some videos out there, I was trying to replace the nozzle or do something, or I was still having issues with how I originally set it up. And so I was trying to take this whole thing apart to figure out what was going on. And when I did that, I took not needle nose pliers, I took vice grips to hold on really tightly to the heat block. And when I did that, I squeezed accidentally my heat filament, or maybe it was my thermistor, and I broke all the wiring to it. So I just ripped it to shreds because I was being a dummy. And so I had to put some videos together showing how to replace that whole thing, which is not something you want to do. So I use this now to gently hold on to it and kind of avoid that problem that you could. You definitely don't use vice grips. You can get away with it. A crescent wrench is fine, but I would probably not try to use, either use a crescent wrench or just use a wrench that's the exact right size. And then once you heat it 285 degrees, then you pull off the nozzle, put it aside, and put the other nozzle on. And it's just about that easy. Now, with this, you need your nozzle. So I have an E3D V6 genuine, 0.4 nozzle. If you go to buy nozzles, know what you're doing. If you're just starting to fiddle with it and you don't want to do any special changes, make sure you get a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. They have nozzles with different sizes on them. So they go higher and lower. And so the smaller they are, the finer print you can do. And the bigger they are, the faster but less fine print you can do. But when you do that, you need to make new G-code files to account for it. So if you don't want to do anything, stay with the 0.4. If you want to go to a different size, that means you can't print the same prints you've been printing. You have to re-slice them into a different G-code that can account for the fact that you have a different nozzle size. So with that, let's go out in the garage and get this going. Okay, so aside from getting the Prusa up to speed with the i3 Mark, I want to get the i3 Mark III in a good state, like I said, to compare to the Prusa Mini. But to show some things that have recently happened, I did go to print this recently, and I had this failure. You can see how it stopped off. Now that might be symptomatic of what, having it not come through quite smoothly. Probably not, because what happens is at the top here is we got these, in this example, we got 2 gears, and it's pushing that filament through. And so what could happen is if all of a sudden something stops it and it can't push through for a second, the gears will keep moving, and it will start to strip the filament from the sides. And once it strips enough, then it has nothing to grab onto. And so that's what occurred here, and then it just, nothing, it's trying to push stuff through and it couldn't push stuff through. Another thing that happened, and this is really hard to see because this is like, this is a strong B as far as quality. It's doing really fine. So I did this little print because the surface hasn't seemed quite right to me recently. It's got like, well, if you look at, you can probably see here, the surface here might be a little notch when I'd rather have it smooth. And so it's probably really difficult to see because it's pretty good, but there are spaces here where it's not quite as evenly covered. So you might be able to see that. So I don't know how well it would make on the video, where it's good, but it's not perfectly nice. So hopefully this will fix that too. There's another reason to do it all. So with that, let's start doing all this cold pull and get it running. So I've got my Prusa Mini on. I need to, Prusa i3 Mark III. So I'm going to preheat it and get it on PLA. And one thing, if you're new and don't know this, if you push and hold down this button, now you have your Z-axis controls. And so I can easily maneuver this and get it up. And in this case, I want to get it up high so I can get to things easier. Now be careful going too high because it still keeps going as it goes up. So let me go, I'll get it about there. And then now I will load it, which is going to take a few seconds as it heats up here, because I want to, push this current filament through. And then we'll do a cold pull, atomic pull. But again, probably watch some other people's video because I don't do enough of them, so maybe some other people have better techniques. Okay, press to load, so we're good now. So now we'll press. I've already done this before. I just want to make sure this is coming out. Looks like we're coming out just fine. Because I want to make sure it's all through there so we can pull it out really well. So now that it should ask us if it looks good in a second. Okay, we'll say yes. And what I'll do now is we'll go to that preheat. We're on the PLA, so what I'll do is I want to stop the preheat. So let's see, I could do well, easiest way, I'll just hit the cancel button here. Hit cancel, which is going to reboot everything. And so now it'll turn off its heat. And now I want to let it cool down a bit. So we can see the nozzle now is 211 degrees. And so I'll come over here and I will cut this. And I want to let it drop because right now it's still hot on that hot end. I can show you my little, printed out this drawing. So it happens right here towards the end right now, this is all liquid goo, so it's easy to push through. But as you go further and further up, especially as you get all the way out, it's not goo at all, it's filament. So as it goes from solid all the way down to here liquid, and so you can see, it's hard to, well, it's getting gooier and hotter the further it goes down. So we want this all to cool off, but not quite to a solid, because if we do it really solid, it'll be harder to pull out. But I've heard different people say different things. I've heard 100 degrees C, I've heard 60 degrees C. Last time I did this, I think I did it 100 degrees C. And now I'm actually in the garage. It's a cold day in here in Colorado, so I normally don't run my printer in the cold garage. Don't do that. I just needed a place to do this demonstration. But you can see mine's dropping probably pretty quickly because it is a cold day and I'm in the garage. But once it hits 100, I'll probably give it a moment, and then I'm really just going to pull this out. Once it hits 100 degrees Celsius, I'm just going to pull this whole thing out. And so it'll be solid at the end, but it should be a little softer, so it's easier to pull out. But when I pull it out, you should see the shape roughly of the end of the nozzle. So the end of this will be pointed, and if there's any gook in there, you'll kind of see gook on there. Now, some people I've seen videos where they actually run it multiple times. I've also seen some videos where people use clear. So they'll get some clear PLA or PETG so they can really see the color of the gook coming out. I haven't done that because my main point is to just clean it out a little bit and then replace the nozzle completely. So there we are, 128, still going down. Okay, there we go, 100. So we'll see how well we do on this. And you can probably put it by hand, but I'll just get this on here, and yeah, it's pulling pretty easily. There we go. And see how it does on its shape there. Let's see, I do a white background here. And so you can see, there's the end. Now, yeah, it might make a little more sense to do this in a clear plastic so you can see the color change if you really want to get the gunk out. But you can see I've pulled, it's retaining the shape that was down there. So it should be pretty clear now. And if you're worried, you could repeat this process. Now, in this case, I'm replacing the nozzle, so I don't really need to repeat the process. So, with that, let me do some of the next things to replace the nozzle. So first, I'll take this guy off. This little fan here. The fan redirection. Of course, be careful because my finger here is next to something that's still 80 degrees Celsius. And this probably needs to be clean. I probably should print a new one. That one's looking a little ugly over the years. So, probably a good idea to reprint another one of these. And that should be in, well, yeah, it's ugly. It needs a new one. But for now, I'll keep using it. So now, if we look under here, we can see here is the heater block. I know it's a bit ugly underneath there. Might be going to get a additional light. So it's been uglified over the years, but it's still functional. Now, if you need to, you can replace the whole thing. And you can see the attachment. So if I go, let me get on this side so I can point it out easier. Over here, you can see all the wiring. So this big mama jam over here, that's the heating element.
Here.
Here we go. So this is the heating element. And then behind it, there's a smaller one that might be hard to see, but there's a smaller hole on the back side that I showed in the image that is the thermistor. You want to stay away from these guys because if you break them, it's not something you can easily resolder because it's hot there. So you just have to replace the whole thing, which I did once. So don't be a dummy and break things like I did. Oh, there you go. So now what they suggest, and we'll break away, because what they say is they want to heat this up. So we can do let's see, settings, let me go to back. Okay, so now Prusa is talking about setting this to 285 degrees. So I'll go to settings, temperature nozzle and pump that up to 285.
That's Celsius?
Yes. So for us American people, that's hot. And so I'll go back to main, go back to info, and we can see it's heating up. So we'll wait for it to get to 285, but then we do that, I should probably, well, you don't want, when you take this off, this will be 285 degrees Celsius. So if I put it on this paper, it'll probably burn a hole in the paper. So you can probably grab a tile. Let me see, do I have anything nice and metallic around here? Should have thought of that beforehand, but while it's heating up, I will go find something in my garage that's metallic and big. Ah, there we go. I'll use an old junky saw. That'll work. Here we go. I have an old junky saw I can place it down on. But, you know, it's so small that I could probably put it on this wood and it would be okay. But if I threw it in a bunch of sawdust, I might have a fire all of a sudden, right? So play it safe. So now I'm going to leave this one in the, well, I can take it out, but it's obvious which one's which, because this one's nice and clean. So there's that one. And now when you tighten this, when you put the new one on, you don't want to crank it on super tight, you want it snug. If you get it on there too tight, it pushes up against this heat break and you could do some damage. So you want to get it on there snug, you don't want to just wrench it. Okay, 271, we're almost there. Okay, there we go. Now for me, I didn't want to mess with this because I did such a bad job on it years ago that I have this 23mm wrench, like I mentioned before, that is the exact size that I can put over here without having to use a crescent wrench. And remember, everything in here is really super hot right now. So if it drops, get your hands out of the way. I need to get a better light. Okay, and we are out. There we go. And we are... Don't touch it. Oh, as I put it on the paper. Well, I put it on the paper like a dummy. But again, it's, you know, don't do what I just did. I should have put it on the metal. That'll probably leave a burn mark. Okay, yeah. Now...
Hold on, let me get that up here. My fingers.
Now, I need to, well, my socket's too deep, so I'm about to do something dangerous. What you should do, okay, maybe I should not do this dangerous. I will go here and hit the cancel button. My socket, see, my problem right now is my socket's so deep that if I put it in there, I can't start it. Once it gets started, I'm okay.
So you're going to cool it off and start it?
I'm going to cool it off to, you should cut off, get a shallower socket or cool it off all the way. I'll cool it off to a reasonable thing and I'll kind of, well, it's like touching a stove. So if I touch it right now, I'm going to burn myself pretty bad, but it's only going to be my fingers and I'm not going to die. But you don't want to burn your fingers, right? So let's do the responsible thing and not hurt ourselves. Did we burn it through?
We didn't.
No, it's so small. So now it should be fairly cooled off. It's so small, and it's yeah, it's gotten pretty.
So it started out like the other one.
Yeah, it started out like that, and now I think I've only replaced it once, so that's probably been on there for a year. You know, so it's gotten used and abused. Okay, so now we've cooled off pretty well. And so I will, but it's still hot right now, so I'm just going to get it started, just barely.
So right now it's like 80 degrees C, but I'm not getting anywhere near it even so. So I got it started, so now I'm good. So now I will get it back up again to 285. A better way to do this would just be have a shorter socket. But we work with what we have, right? Okay, so I don't know if it's so important that it's hot right now, but so I will get it a little more snug. So it's just snug right now, and then I'll hold the block. And just get it nice and good and snug. I'm not torquing it. So now it should be good. So now I got that all going. Let me go run some filament through it just to make sure it's coming out fine.
You have to put that on?
Yeah, I should. Yeah, let me you're right. Wasn't paying attention. I could put this fan back on, which I have my tool, which I need to go make. Now that could be part of my problems too, is because this is going to redirect some of the airflow to cool it off at the end, so that being all gooed up like that is probably not helping me. So I will print one of these out and replace it as well. Now again, this is hot here, but I'm nowhere near the heat source with my fingers. But you know what? That could be systematic of what's happening. This could be what's happening because this is not redirecting the airflow well, or as well as it should be. So I probably need to print one of those out, but I need to print it out in PETG, not PLA. PETG can handle the hotter temperatures. And if I can just find where this starts.
Should have ordered one of those when you ordered the other.
Oh, I should have. Yeah, I didn't think about that. I mean, when I'm ordering stuff from Prusa, you know, he does a better job printing stuff out than I do, I would hope, and so I don't mind ordering some 3D printed parts from him because he only charges a couple bucks for it. So now we will preheat to PLA, and so now it's technically too hot, but it'll come down pretty quickly. But I should be able to load it, even at a higher temperature, it'll just kind of go through. So I hit the load button, and we should start seeing this come through. Oh, as it raises up on me. There we go. And I'll say no, because I want to push some more through just to get it going. There we go. So what I'm hit no again, just to make sure it's all going through just fine. So now I think we're good, but I am going to go print out, and I'll print out on this. I'll print out a new version of this because even if I'm having issues because of this, they're small issues. Small issues that aren't going to affect how this works. But then I'll get that on and we'll see how, if we're doing really good prints, hopefully again, and then I can start doing some comparisons between the Prusa Mini and the Prusa i3 Mark III. So, there you go.
Hey, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, hey, give it a thumbs down. Also, if you like what we're doing here, subscribe to the channel by clicking the subscribe button. And lastly, have a piece of info to share? Just post a comment.